Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for not holding against me the fact that I come from the other place. What I'm going to talk about today is based on a chapter from my doctoral research in which I consider writing materiality and orality in the Deir Alla plaster inscriptions. Among other points, these inscriptions present some unusual visual phenomena. I will argue today that they relate to how we understand some of its textual features. There are also a number of other unusual features of Deir Alla as an ancient site. So first, I'll initially provide a very brief overview of the site in order to contextualize these inscriptions. For those of you who are perhaps more familiar with this, thank you for your patience. Deir Alla was situated at the boundaries between the kingdoms of Israel, Aram, and Phoenicia. Since its discovery in the 1960s, there's been much discussion about the archaeology and dating of the site. The Deir Alla plaster inscriptions are most likely to have been written sometime during the 7th to 8th centuries BCE, during phase IX. However, it's difficult to assign the inscriptions a more precise or definitive date within this approximation. On site during this time, it's clear that textile production was also a major activity. There's been much further discussion as to whether the room in which the inscriptions were found functioned as a religious sanctuary. One of the factors which has informed this argument includes the presence of stone benches. I'll come back to that point later on. By plaster inscriptions, what we're referring to is a text that originally took the form of ink writing on a plaster wall. Among other challenges, this writing has survived chiefly in fragments. This is a reconstruction of how and where the writing seems to have been originally positioned on the wall before being destroyed by an earthquake. And this surviving writing was known excitingly as Combination 1 and Combination 2. On the writing of the inscriptions, their script takes the form of Old Aramaic. The discovery of the ink itself therefore makes these inscriptions the earliest evidence we have of Aramaic writing in ink. It's more challenging to attempt to categorize their dialect. This is because the writing combines some Aramaic linguistic features with some Canaanite linguistic features. Scholars have been somewhat divided on how best to account for this. However, Laura Quick points out
sorry, that was my phone interfering. Please go ahead.
Not at all. Laura Quick points out that the inscriptions are geographically located at a border region. She therefore suggests, and I quote, "We might argue instead that its mixed dialect is perfectly appropriate for its geographical context, in which nations and hence dialects existed in a continuum with each other. In my view, this is the most productive approach to the dialect of the inscriptions." Moving on to some of their visual qualities, the writing itself is presented using two different coloured inks, black and red. This is another unusual feature of ancient Northwest Semitic inscriptions, and in particular, it evokes comparison with the use of different coloured inks at Intillit Ajrud. But at Deir Alla, while black ink is used for the majority of the writing, the red ink is used to highlight particular sections of the text, such as the title of Combination 1. Red ink has also been used to draw the margins which delineated the inscriptions, as, for example, you can see for Combination 1 here. It's therefore used both as a layout device and to highlight certain sections of the textual content. In my text and translation on the handout, I attempted to observe the use of red ink, but as it's in black and white, I've made some adjustments, by which I mean I've also underlined and placed the red sections in bold to make it absolutely clear which sections these are. However, the original formatting at Deir Alla didn't underline these sections. This brings us on to some of the textual elements of the inscriptions. 3 different sections of the inscriptions are written in red ink, as well as the margins. Some scholars had argued that combination 1 and combination 2 should be taken as separate compositions due to some of their different literary features. Another argument, as for example by Emil Puesch, is that the use of red ink acts as a physical layout device which unifies them. Importantly, however, there's another unifying factor which has been previously overlooked. That is, that the use of red ink in both combinations operates in tandem with the meaning of the text. The red passages function as rubrics in which their visual and textual features interrelate. The first rubric in line 1 of combination 1 acts as a titling strategy. It states, the account of Balaam, son of Beor, who was seer. The rubric in line 2 then records the divine commission for making the inscription, thus will he do. Both of these rubrics contain some important references to writing. The first rubric uses the word account, sipra, to self-designate itself as an inscription. In Northwest Semitic, this word has a wide semantic range and can be translated as a book, scroll, and message, to name a few examples. But in the Deir Alla Plaster Inscriptions, the writerly qualities of sipra are contextualized by the very act of making the inscription. The divine command for Balaam to do or make, yipa'al, in the second rubric in line 2, can be understood to refer back to the making of the inscription itself. They said to Balaam, son of Beor, thus will he do. Overall, writing and the making of the inscription play an important role in how the inscriptions designate itself. As well as writerly qualities, rubrics 1 and 2 place emphasis on prophetic vision. And in the context of this vision, oral and visual phenomena are interrelated. The first rubric and the title specifies that Balaam is a hazeh, literally a seer of visions. At the end of line 1, the same verbal root occurs again in black ink to describe the fact that Balaam saw a vision, mazeh. It also specifies the conditions in which the vision took place, i.e., and he saw a vision at night. In line 2, continued in black ink, the inscription specifies further that this vision was like an oracle of El. The word used for oracle here is masa, which denotes a specific kind of prophetic vision with oral links. For example, the Hebrew cognate masa describes a specifically oral message from God, rather than one which is literally visual. This word is therefore sometimes translated directly as utterance. Other translations include the term pronouncement, as in Habakkuk 1:1, the Masah which Habakkuk the prophet saw. There are also multiple similarities between the Balaam of the Hebrew Bible in the Book of Numbers 22 to 24 and the Balaam of the Deir Alla Plaster Inscriptions. To highlight one point of similarity among many others, both of their respective prophetic visions involve speech performance. The word used to describe Balaam's vision in the Book of Numbers is mashal rather than masa. On the nuances of mashal, Jacqueline Weintraub identifies, and here I quote, that the performance of Mashal's speech seems to traverse what the scholar might identify as multiple distinct genres or forms of speech, such as instruction and prophecy. Within this framework, Mashal is characterized as oral discourse. The use of Masah in combination 1 and Mashal in Numbers is also comparable. Both describe an oral message specifically relating to prophetic vision, and both words relate to the idea of lifting up or calling out with one's voice. In both rubrics of combination 1, written, oral, and visual phenomena interrelate. The Masah, with all of its oral associations, also functions to be seen. And within the self-designation of combination 1 as an oracle and an utterance, writing plays an important role. It functions as the authoritative mode of discourse by which to record the vision that Balaam saw and the divine words. The divine instruction to textualize the account imbues it with divine authority. The use of red ink highlights and rubricates this. The third and final rubric occurs in line 17 of combination 2. Written entirely in red ink, it presents another instruction for Balin. It is to make the inscription known orally. The writing states, literally, to make known the account, Sifra, he spoke for his people by a tongue, al-Lashan, your judgment and your punishment. The use of the word account, Sifra, with all of its writerly associations, relates back to the instructions which are rubricated in combination 1. But this time, Sifra is used in combination with the phrase Deir Alla al-Lashan, to make known the account by tongue, to denote oral discourse. In this context, oral and written phenomena are interrelated more closely. The red ink sets forth the command for the spoken pronouncement of the written account. Although combination 2 is very fragmentary, line 17 also seems to rubricate the divine command directly from the gods. This command stresses that the writing, the Sifra, which reflects the speech of the gods, is to be re-oralized and made known. In both combination 1 and combination 2, the inscriptions develop multiple genres and multiple modes of discourse. Such genres include prophetic vision and the foretelling of a mundus inversus, an inverted world. Other genres include love poetry, ritual, and cursing. All of these genres have close links to oral performance, but the inscriptions also develop many other modes of discourse, including written instruction, written ritual, visual phenomena specifically related to prophetic oracles, and even the manipulation of clothing as part of a ritual clothing curse in combination 2. It is, however, the idea of divine speech as writing, which functions as a unifying theme across the red ink. It also functions as a unifying theme across the Deir Alla plaster inscriptions as a composite composition. Despite the multiple genres and modes of discourse which the inscriptions develop, its basic nature is a record of speech from the gods. Ultimately, the inscriptions represent divine speech as writing. I suggest that this, therefore, contextualizes the variety of different genres and discourses the inscriptions blend. They are commenting on the nature of and the interaction between writing, orality, and divine authority. Such writing reflects the speech of the gods. By writing this down, the textualization is fixed, and by subsequently re-oralizing words with divine authority, such speech acts are made efficacious. The argument for unifying the inscriptions in this way, with particular reference to the use of red ink, is also supported by some of the other visual and material features of the inscriptions. Above the margins of the writing, an image of a winged sphinx has also partially survived. Thank you. The position of the body and the legs appear to be in motion. In other words, the sphinx seems to be patrolling the writing. More widely in the ancient Near East, the symbolism of the sphinx is associated with uniquely religious and protective dimensions. For example, on amulet 1 at Aslan Tash, an inscribed sphinx also has an apotropaic function as part of its wider amuletic defense charm. The sphinx is depicted in a similar fashion to the one at Deir Alla. The horn curves forwards and the body is presented as if it were in motion. In this amulet, writing and imagery are also combined for the purposes of protection, worn directly upon the body. All of these factors suggest to me that we might also interpret the sphinx at Deir Alla as if it were guarding or protecting the inscriptions. In this setting, it's important to recall that the writing itself emphasizes having a divine source. The presence of the sphinx would protect the divine words from being altered or tampered with. This strategy also reflects the mindset of a number of other Northwest Semitic inscriptions, which contain clauses that explicitly state that the text of the inscription should not be altered in any way. So far, I've argued that there are intertextual links between Combination 1 and Combination 2. This is done through the visual and thematic cohesion provided by the various rubrics and the development of different modes of discourse. I suggest that we can further extend such intertextual elements to the intertextile. Earlier on, I referred to textile production on site at Deir Alla, which took place on a large scale. The physical remains of woven textiles and loom weights have also been discovered on site, and some of these threads have revealed that rare cloth was being woven. These threads consist of a very finely woven hemp linen. The use of such linen widely held religious significance in the ancient Near East, with particular reference to priestly function. So garments were being woven on site, likely with some religious function. Crucially, both inscriptions at Deir Alla also present some textual features related to textiles. Combination 1 contains a reference to sewing. A goddess is to sew up the sky and bolt up the heavens to cause disruption upon earth. Combination 2 refers even more specifically to the ritual manipulation of clothing in the context of a curse. Accordingly, there is a remarkable congruence between the material finds at Deir Alla and the theme of textiles at work in the texts themselves. The role of clothing is especially prominent in the context of the curse in Combination 2. All of this indicates that we should not read the inscriptions in isolation from their material and visual features. Rather, we should factor in their visual presentation and the broader context of the find spot. On this note, earlier I also mentioned that the room in which the inscriptions were located contained stone benches. This representation depicts how the benches originally lined the walls of the room. The presence of these stone benches has led some scholars to theorize that the inscriptions may originally have been a scribal exercise. But such stone benches, as Margarita Steiner has pointed out, are frequently associated with cultic activity, as at Kuntalit Ajud and Kibet el-Kom, for example. The room itself would also have been very difficult to access because it contained no main door and no main windows. This raises the interesting question of how anyone might have accessed the inscriptions. Consequently, the setup of the room indicates that visibility would also have been very poor. This factor also presents another point of congruence between the material context of the inscriptions and a textual theme. In my discussion of Combination 1, I noted that the conditions of Balaam's vision took place at night. This is also the case in Numbers 22. Visibility would have been very poor inside the room at Deir Alla, to the extent that without bringing light into the room, such as a lamp, it may have been near impossible to view the inscriptions at all. H. Franklin has suggested that this may have been intentional, and that the writing therefore functions as hidden writing. He further suggests that the darkness could reflect the religious implications of the text, as writing which sets forth divine speech. Alternatively, two other scholars, Alice Mandel and Jeremy Smoke, have examined the role which light played in inscriptions at Kibet el-Kom. There, a number of tombs contained apocryphal inscriptions as well as bench rooms, and likewise, without a light, these inscriptions are likely to have remained in darkness. At Kuntalit Ajud, Alice Mandel and Jeremy Smoke suggest that the light of a lamp is likely to have made the inscriptions flicker or dance, leading to, and I quote, shifting lightscapes. This may have imbued the inscriptions with a magical or numinous effect. More widely in Northwest Semitic literature, both light and darkness hold a range of religious associations. Darkness is often associated with death, the underworld, ritual, and particular kinds of vision. And in this way, you may be noticing multiple similarities between these themes and the Deir Alla plaster inscriptions. Light and flame, on the other hand, are closely linked to divine presence. Importantly, darkness and divine revelation directly from the gods are both emphasized in the inscriptions. So the effect of light on these inscriptions might be comparable to Kemet el-Kon, or darkness could play a larger and more significant role. But ultimately, when all of these visual and material factors are considered together, they relate very closely to the content of the inscriptions. I've highlighted some of the ways in which these inscriptions blend a variety of different features. These include textual genre and different modes of discourse, including speech, writing, visuality, and other material factors such as clothing and light. Traditionally, scholars have presupposed a relationship between genre and orality in the Deir Alla plaster inscriptions. As I pointed out today, many of the genres recalled by the inscriptions can be connected closely to orality and speech performance. But ultimately, the inscriptions combine textual and material strategies to undercut the oral nature of these genres. In particular, its emphasis on the divine origin of the writing contextualizes represented speech. The use of red ink also emphasizes the oracle is divine. As a visual feature, it operates in tandem with the meaning of the text. Scholars have also made a number of presuppositions about the relationship between the content and the structure of combination 1 and combination 2. This includes a strong emphasis on its original performance context. Within such a framework, combination 2 might theoretically be understood as more oral than combination 1, because it contains explicitly oral speech acts. On the other hand, combination 1 might be seen as more writerly, since it primarily develops a narrative. But the inscriptions challenge this perspective. Combination 1 presents framed speech as a literary device within a narrative setting. This interaction between orality and writing is then developed further in combination 2, which presents curses, an apparently oral genre, as having clear, functional, and contextual links to the narrative developed in combination 1. In the Deir Alla plaster inscriptions, writing also functions as the authoritative mode of discourse. As a direct representation of divine speech, it also confirms the importance of writing about and writing by prophets and scribes. Balaam the prophet becomes Balaam the scribe, according to the instructions to write the divine words. Divine speech, represented textually, becomes richly and religiously significant. It also makes a point about the authority of written texts in an oral world. On this basis, the inscriptions challenge the idea that certain genres and texts are absolutely oral. Although scholars frequently placed certain oral features within a chronological framework, Northwest Semitic texts that have identifiably more poetic than more oral features have then been considered to be closer to spoken word than others. But these inscriptions model that spoken word could be used for different purposes, the setting of writing. This encompasses varying degrees of heightened or poetic language. Speech is also used in the Deir Alla plaster inscriptions to underpin and develop a variety of complex literary devices. And furthermore, the inscriptions also draw on intertextual and intertextile devices for ritual and religious efficacy. Drawing a correlation between genre, form, and content with reference to greater or lesser degrees of orality is not supported. Rather, these texts undercut our expectations that certain genres are typically encountered as oral. It is done by emphasizing textuality and writtenness when recalling these genres. They ultimately caution us against expectations and biases about oral literature. And finally, although the development of oral formulaic theory has led to greater emphasis being placed on the performance of a text, the Deir Alla Plaster Inscriptions also demonstrate that a written text could be imbued with authority even within a predominantly oral setting. They model a complex process of interaction through the use of different media in order to convey its communicative load. Orality is only one feature and one device at work within the multimodal and discursive setting of the Deir Alla Plaster Inscriptions. Thank you.